Hello, thank you everyone who is joining us for our very first global webinar. We hope that for the next hour we will be able to answer any questions that you might have had about the French claims databases, their use, the protocols to access it. I am joined by Aurélie Schmidt, who is a project director, and Benjamin Grenier, who is a project manager. And I am Mona Mihailescu. I am an analyst for real-world evidence. So we'll just present our company, Heva, in a couple of words, and then we will dive into the subject of the databases, when you need the databases, what are the different sub-databases of the French National Health Claims Database, and other options that you might have in terms of local data. And as I have already mentioned, at the end there will be the Q&A session. So about Heva, we were created in 2005 by Ludovic Lamarsalle and Alexandre Vanstock, who are pharmacists and health economists with an extensive experience in consulting for the pharmaceutical industry. Our team has been steadily growing, and we have been striving to develop innovative approaches of data science and to provide some powerful and impactful communication tools and to emphasize on data organization. So today we are 37 collaborators over different fields such as statistics, data science, project management, data visualization, and so on, as you can see. And very important it is that we own a secured server on which we can host the health data, which is very important, especially in terms of European EU regulations. So I will pass over to Aurélie, who will tell you a little bit more about the key points where you might need data in the life cycle and development of medication and other healthcare products.
Yeah, thank you, and hi everyone. Happy to talk today. So as you can see on the slide, we need data all along the drug or the medical device development. Of course, it starts during the clinical development, where the request for marketing authorization in France. And in France particularly, you will need to contact the HIS for a dossier, the transparency dossier, the health economics model, but also you will have to exchange with the CEPS during price negotiation. All along the drug development, you will need to some data. We can help you as soon as the clinical development is there to, for example, if you have a clinical trials and you need to simulate a comparator group, this is something we can do with the SNDS database. We can also help to provide data on disease epidemiology to assess your target population and also understand the current healthcare offer before launching your product. When it is time to discuss with the French health authorities, we can support you with providing data for the mandatory dossiers, transparency dossier, the health economic dossier, because in particular you will need data to feed your models. So the database, as you will see, contains a lot of data from the cost, and it will help you. Also, something that is needed in France regularly, the HIS asks for post-inscription studies. So that when they give you the marketing authorization, they can ask you to provide short and long-term follow-up on your product. And the renewal is every 5 years. And they can ask every 5 years to have some new data and some exhaustive data, which is particularly complicated together when you have to do an observational study and recruit centers. It can be very complicated to be exhaustive. Here in the database, you will see we have all the French patients, 68 million of patients. So this is the best asset for your dossiers.
So as you have seen, it is important to have access to updated data, and it is often, these studies are often done in regards to health authorities' demands, but they can also bring other advantages to your development pipeline, especially through a better understanding of the local target populations and their needs. It can also help you to identify new adverse events to prevent drug interactions. These studies can also be implemented in order to predict future trends in burden disease pathways, and also as budget estimations, and of course to create impactful scientific communication. So I will now pass over to Benjamin, who will tell you more about the structure of the French national health databases.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Anna, and good morning, good lunch break, or good apéro if you're depending on the time or the place of the planet that you're joining us. So we will have a brief overview of the SNDS data, and we'll go over the different subsets which compose the SNDS. So the first thing that you have to bear in mind with the SNDS is that the database has been set up for reimbursement purposes, and that's the main reason for its creation, and not for epidemiology purposes. We use it for that, but it's a reimbursement database, a claims database, which is composed of the SNIRAM, which is the health insurance data. That can be linked with the CPDC, which is the database that gathers all the causes of death that are completed with a ICD-10 classification. If you wish to access the SNIRAM, you'll have to go through the standard procedures with a methodological, then followed by a data privacy assessment in order to have access to the database. And if, depending on the study objectives of your project, you might be also interested in the ESND, which is a representative sample of the SNIRAM at a 200th scale, but which access is much quicker compared to the whole SNIRAM database. But obviously, since it's a sample, you have to study a prevalent enough, let's say, pathology for it to be represented within the ESND. So let's get back to the SNIRAM. The SNIRAM is composed of both community data, which are the DCIR, that can be linked with the PMSI, which is the hospital discharge database mainly. You can also use the RPU database, which is the database that gathers information about emergency services admission. But the main goal here is to talk about the SNIRAM, DCIR, and the PMSI. And you can access all those databases through the Health Data Hub, which is the unique platform that handles all the interactions that would be administrative or regarding data privacy to pursue your project. So as the schema might show, it is a complex and sophisticated database. It is actually one of the largest in the world. As I already mentioned briefly, you will require to follow a certain type of procedures depending on the type of database that would be relevant for your project. And another key take-home message from the presentation is that the goal of the study has to be aligned with one of the public interests, public health interests that are set up by the law that allows us to access such databases. And as it is related to its size, it requires extensive data management and specialized knowledge to handle the different tables and to be able to export the results for the analysis.
So this is what we have seen already, and our goal is to explain it to you so that, and to also accompany you in the setup of projects, so that you do not find yourself in the situation of this lovely gentleman that we see here on the slide, who is scratching his head, wondering what does all these MR mean and what is DHT. All right, so moving on, all of this is great, but realistically, what are your options?
So we'll start with the hospital discharge database, which is also the database which is the easiest to get access to. So the PMSI basically follows the main 4 fields that compose the hospital landscape in France, with medicines, obstetric and surgery, psychiatry, home care units, and follow-up and rehabilitation care. You can access to this database only if you wish through the MR6 procedure. That is a procedure that has been edicted by the CNIL, the French data privacy organization. And if you access data through the MR6, you'll have access to 9 successive years plus the one ongoing. So currently, the time frame that is available is from 2013 to 2021. And if you wish to get access to data prior to 2012, you'll have to go through the standard procedure as for the access to the whole SNDS database. In terms of informations that are available within the database, we'll have a focus on the MCO, so medicine, surgery, obstetric field of the PMSI, as it gathers most of the activity in the PMSI. Some slight modification appear depending on the field, so with follow-up and rehabilitation care, for instance. But within the PMSI MCO, you have a bunch access to a bunch of administrative information, anonymized information, of course, such as age, sex, geographic code of residence of the patient, some administrative information about the hospital in which the patient is taken care of. You'll have also information about the stay, so the length of stay, the outcome after the hospitalization. So if the patients gets back home, gets transferred to another ward of the hospital, or if he or she went through intensive care units. Regarding the medical information that are available, you'll have as many claims database are constructed, access to the main and other types of diagnosis that rely on the ICD-10 classification. Another particular message that we would like to convey is that we use the ICD-10, the ICD-10 version, the European version, and some codes are adapted to the French PMSI. That might be something to bear in mind when, for instance, you would have developed an algorithm on Optum or the Veteran database relying on the ICD-10 CM classification. Because some of the ICD-10 codes are not corresponding within the ICD-10 that we use within the PMSI, and you'll have to work with, for instance, coding physicians to get the transposition for the codes from the CM to the European version of the ICD-10 in order to be able to select the same type of patients. So the principal diagnosis is, for instance, the motive of hospitalization, and all the significantly associated diagnoses are basically the comorbidities of the patients. You'll also have access to 2 types of information. So either the procedures, so the surgeries are mainly imaging procedures. And also you'll have access to drugs and medical devices informations, but only the expensive ones. For the detail to the molecule level, all the non-expensive drugs are included within the flat fee that the hospital receives from the national healthcare insurance, and are not accessible at the medical level, unfortunately, within the PMSI.
Now, how do you get access to the PMSI? There is a simplified methodology that is called MR006. So MR006, there are other simplified methodologies, 004, 005, for other purposes than this database. The first step is for the industrial, that we call the data, the data provider, will be to have a unique commitment to the methodology of reference, MR006. Once you will do this once, so you will have to fill in a form online. You can see the first step on the slide. So you will have to do this once, and then you can go to the next step. So the CNIL is the authority that is handling with the data privacy and data security. You will commit to this once and for all the other studies from the PMSI that you will do. Then the next step will be to go to the ATIH. So that ATIH is the one that is handling the data and that will be giving the data. You will need to have a contract with the ATIH. So here again, it is one-time step. You will do this once, and then you can access as many times to the database as you want. This is also very quickly. It can be done like in 2 weeks. It's a simple signature to do. So it will depend if the person, for example, is on holiday, but otherwise it's very quick. So when you commit to this simplified methodology, you will commit also to conduct an audit, independent audit every 3 years on the use of the data. You will need to check, or at least the audit will need to check why you are using the data and that it's not prohibited. For example, you cannot use this for marketing purposes, purely marketing purposes. So you will need to justify why you set up the study. So the 2 first steps, you do it once, and then you can do as many studies as you want. Then for each study, you will need to write a study protocol to register the protocol on the Health Data platform. And then the data will be automatically available for the data processor. That means either a company like us or another company that is specialized in analysis this data. And then, for example, here in Neva, we have a secure server. So we have the data internally, and it's already accessible because we use the database a lot, like every day. We have maybe 60 to 70 studies on PMSI per year, so it's really a lot. But for other providers, other companies like us that do less studies, they will need to wait for the data to come. You need to know that for you, it's transparent. Buying the data is transparent for you, but we are the one buying the data from the ATH once a year. We receive it. So there is an update annually. In May, we receive the data from the last year. For example, we are in March 2023, and we will soon receive the 2022 data. And then we can proceed with the study. It can be very quick. Usually a study on PMSI is a 4 to 5 month study, and then you receive the results, and you need to commit at the end to publish the results. So you need to communicate the results in a confidential way to the Health Data Hub within the 6 months after the end of the study. And then you need to communicate in a public way, like a poster or manuscript within the 3 years after the end of the study. About the strengths of the PMSI, I think you understand that we have a great experience with the database, and you have an easy access to the simplified process that I just described. So it's very quick. I mean, once you do the first two steps, then you directly have access to the database. So it's very quick. There is nothing to wait. The data is in a secured server. You have access immediately to this, so there is no extraction to wait or anything like this. It's very quick to set up. You do not have to act like you can have a scientific committee with clinicians, but it's not mandatory. So if you need to have a quick look at something, then you can just go on and do it. And as Benjamin described, you have medicalized data. That means that you have stays with ICD-10 coding. So if, for example, you need to search for a disease, or you need to replicate maybe a study from another country, you can quickly do it and easily compare your results with the other study you have. Another end, on the limitations, we do not have any information on death outside of hospital. So for survival analysis, that could be a limitation if the patients, in this disease are dying outside of hospital. Also, another thing we need to know about the PMSI is we do not have all the information on dialysis and radiotherapy in private sector. We do not get the data. It's not in the database. It's in another database. We do not have access. So that could be a limitation of this kind of studies. Also, we do not have any data on drugs that are not expensive. If it's inside the DRGs, we do not have access to the data. So that could be also if you're studying a drug that it's inside the DRGs, you will not see it and you will not be able to study this. And also the final one, but it's related to all the database that we will present today. We have no results of exams or biological exams or radiographies, etc. And we have no information in the PMSI on prescriptors.
So let's move on to the SNDS, the SNIRAM database, the one that includes community data as well. So the PMSI is very fine if you have to study a pathology or any type of objective that would be relevant to hospital setting only. On top of being very quickly accessible, it might be sufficient. But when it is not enough, and that you have either a patient pathway to study outside of the hospital setting, or in a simpler way, just you would require some healthcare consumption to be identified within the community setting to properly identify your patient. You'll have to get access to the SNIRAM database. And as I said, it contains the PMSI, so the hospital discharge information and the community data. So as I already presented, the info that are contained within the PMSI, here are the information within the community setting. So also administrative information with the anonymized number of the patient, the age, the sex, the city and department of residence, some universal healthcare coverage information, and the date of death. Whether it happens in a hospital setting or outside of the hospital setting, but you won't have access to the reason of the patient's death. You'll have some info about the health professionals, so the specialty and the category of the prescriber, the place of execution, and some other administrative information. And as of medical information, you'll have access to all the reimbursed consumptions of the patient. So either medical acts, as I presented in the PMSI, biology, medical devices, drugs, medical transports. But as Aurélie said, unfortunately, regarding the biology and the pathology exams, you'll not have access to the results of the tests. That could be useful to identify patients with the molecular status, for instance, in oncology, but we do not have access to that information. For each performance, you'll have access to the detailed coding and the quantity, the amount that is presented for the reimbursement, and the costs from the national healthcare insurance perspective, the date of care, and also some specific information about France with the long-term diseases. That is a healthcare coverage system that gets you covered for a given pathology that is usually a chronic one. For instance, diabetes. If you have a long-term disease for diabetes, all of your healthcare consumptions related to diabetes are 100% covered by the the NHI, without you needing to subscribe to a complementary healthcare coverage. And that's sometimes a way to identify patients and one of our inclusion criteria. So you'll have the diagnosis with the ICD-10 codes for the long-term diseases and also the dates and regarding the sick leaves. So you'll have access to that information and the amount of money that the patients get from the sick for his sick leaves. You'll also have access to the part of healthcare consumptions that is unavailable within the PMSI only, with the external consultations and the radiotherapy that Aurélie mentioned with the PMSI only. As I said, you'll have access to PMSI, hospital discharge database, SNDS, community data. You can also use the RPU database that is mostly emergency admissions information with administrative data, the medical data, to the reasons, the severity of the patients. But this database is almost complete at the 90% rate since 2017. So that might be a limitation if you require an extensive inclusion or a follow-up period for your study. You can also have access to the ResiDePA database on the next slide with that is the nursing home database in France. Regarding the data that we get from this database, it's the most useful is the entry and the exits of the patients, since as a particularity in France, most of healthcare consumptions of the patient are unavailable and included within the flat fee that the patient pays for his nursing home residence, and we usually use it as an additional motive of censorship for the patient's follow-up. As soon as he gets admitted to a nursing home, we stop the follow-up of the patient. I also mentioned the CPDC database. That is the database that gathers all the causes of death that are completed by physicians via ICD-10 coding. So the data are available from 2026 to 2017. And the reason for its delay is that all the death motives were completed by hand from death certificates. So that's why it's not as quick as informations that are completed within computers. And the 2020 year availability as opposed to 2018 and 2019 is only thanks to COVID, because the governmental organizations in France needed the information. So the info was completed for the year 2020.
Yeah, I will. Before just having this slide, there are some questions in the Q&A, so I try to answer. So for now, in the PMSI, we have access up to 2021 data, and 2022 will be available very soon in 2 months. SNDS, also another question about the linkage between SNDS and CPDC. So I'm answering now because then we will move to another topic. So the linkage is totally possible, and this is usually how we work. We ask linkage between SNDS and CPDC, and you will see in the dossier you can just tick the box and say that you would want both, and then the French health insurance does the linkage directly. And for the slide, yes, of course, we can share afterwards. Now about the access to SNDS, it's a bit more complicated than the PMSI alone, because the PMSI, there was a methodology of reference, and once you say, okay, I'm totally willing to do as you say in the MR, everybody believes you and you can do it, and there is this audit, but otherwise it's okay. Here, it's a bit more complicated. This is what we call the standard procedure. This means that you need to go through a lot of committees that is reviewing your dossier. So to start with, you need to write a study protocol and to have it validated by a scientific committee. This is not mandatory, but this is what we recommend to do, because then the dossier has more chances to be accepted because you have already clinicians having questions and validating your hypothesis. So this is highly what we recommend. And possibly French clinicians or French methodologists that know about the French health reimbursement system and the French practices in a hospital. This is very important. Then you need to have a dossier. So there is a protocol. There is also some other regulatory documents that you need to put in the dossier, and you need to submit to the Health Data Hub. That is examining the dossier and checking that everything is okay, and you can go to the next step. If it's okay, you need to go through the SNDS evaluation. So the SNDS is an ethical committee that is going to review your dossier and have a look at the protocol, if everything is aligned with the study objectives, the outcomes, the analysis, the data period you're asking. So they are examining all this. And it's a bit like when you submit an article, a scientific article, they will ask for maybe some other things. So there is 3 cases. Either you have a green flag, everything is okay, you can go to the next step and you're very happy. This is most of the case not the case, actually, because it's maybe 30% of the cases, everything is good, and you go, okay, everything is fine. Orange flag, that means that, okay, it's very good what you do, what you're intending to do. It's but you need maybe to review some of the outcomes of some of the analysis, because maybe you wanted to do too much, and the SNDS doesn't like when you want to do too much things in one study. Or maybe it's because you were a bit unclear, or maybe not accompanied by the right clinicians or the right study team. So you need to go back and to review the dossier and modify the protocol, and then go back to the SNDS. The SNDS is a meeting every month. It's a monthly meeting. So you need to wait like for 1 month, etc., until it's okay. And the third situation is a red flag. That means that they do not believe in your study. They think maybe it's not of public interest, or maybe it's not well designed, or another topic like this, or maybe it's a bit too weird for them. So they said, okay, now just delete this and try to think about something else. So usually for us in our team, we get either green flag, sorry, it's either okay, everything is fine, or either it's orange. We never get red, because we try to do this before, to do like the SNDS, but before, to have an internal evaluation ourselves. When everything is fine, you can move on to the CNIL. So the CNIL is more about data privacy and data security. So they will check where you what kind of years you're asking for. They are checking that you're not asking for too many years. For example, like if you're exaggerating and asking for like 20 years, let's say, they will say, okay, you don't really need this, just reduce the time period. And they will also have a look at where you are stocking your data. So usually in this kind of studies, you will use what the French health insurance has. It's the CNAM portal. And this is already known by the CNIL, so this is fine, and they give the authorization right away. So we put, in theory, is 2 to 4 months to give the authorization, but usually we have the authorization in like 1 month maximum. So once this is done, this is really the first step where you write the protocol and everything is validated. Then you go to the next step, which is having the data extraction. And this is a really long time period. We put 8 to 10 months to get the data, because the thing is, you need to go and see the French health insurance, which is a really small team. They are 4 people and they have 200 dossiers per year. So this is really important for them to understand, to be clear when you go to them, to be very clear about your request and what you want, and to be quite patient about this. So maybe let's say 10 months after that, you get the data and you can start working, or at least the data processor that you have chosen can start working. As an industrial, you have no right of accessing the data, and all the people that are working on the data, they need to follow a special training on this kind of data. And as before, as I was saying, for the PMSI, you have the same obligation of publication. Strengths of limitations, it's a bit like before for the PMSI. I mean, we are still on an exhaustive database. You have to understand that in France, all of healthcare consumption is reimbursed by the French health insurance. So this is very important to understand, because when we go to see a clinician, or we go to have an exam, or to the pharmacy, everything is recorded and reimbursed. So this is a very exhaustive database, and of course, it's complete. As we mentioned before, we use standardized data. You can, if you go to another country and see the codes that are used, we can use the same in France and just replicate the study. As you understand, I guess also each patient has a unique identifier that you can follow throughout the time and throughout the space. That means if the patient change department, for example, you will still find the patient. And the limitation, of course, it's only reimbursed healthcare data. So if the patient goes to the pharmacy and just buy a drug that is not reimbursed, we will not see it in the database. And also, we will not know if the patient actually takes the drug. I mean, he goes to the pharmacy, he buys a drug, but we never know what he do with the drugs. We can just guess that if he comes back to the pharmacy and buy another one, then it means that the previous one was actually used.
So between the PMSI and the whole SNDS database, you can also have access to the ESND, which is the representative sample. It has been available since late 2022 because the previous sample was a sample at 100 rate, and was not as representative as this one. Why you would need it is, as I mentioned within the first flowchart slide, you would have to study a prevalent enough pathology, and the advantage of the ESND is that it allows for quicker access to data with 2 follow-up periods that would be available. So either 9 years plus the current year, or 19 years plus the current year. The data are updated 4 times a year, and you'll have some restrictions, obviously, to access the database. So the follow-up period is of your choice, but you'll have to justify it within your study protocol and synopsis. You'll have to make the conflicts of interest declaration. As for all the database that you will have access to, either PMSI or SNDS, and you'll have to set up an advisory board, composed of at least 3 experts of 2 different specialties, and you'll have to set up a transparency, a mandatory transparency. Usually it's on your website, a special dedicated page that patients can get access to, and where you set up the list of each treatments and each study using patients' data that you would perform.
So access to ESND, so it's a bit simpler than what I just described, because we have no CESRES, we have no CNIL, and as a PMSI, we have a simplified procedure. So what you need to do here, you need to write a protocol, and you need to have, it's mandatory to have a scientific committee with 3 experts. So this is really the difference between with before. This is really mandatory to have experts, and they will evaluate the project to a grid that you will provide with the protocol to the Health Data Hub. And the Health Data Hub, they will read and they will see, okay, you have been approved by 3 experts, so we give the authorization to access the data. This is how it's happening, really. Then you need to the CNAM, the French Health Insurance, to get a convention to get access to this, of course. But other than that, there is no data extraction as before. So you don't need to express what you need. There is no interaction with the data that the data that you need, and there is no back and forth about maybe a bad quality of data. So this is really different from before, and you have access very quickly, like in 3 months, to the data. So this is a high difference. I mean, between 1 year and 3 months, okay, there is less data, but it's so quicker. And then, as before, you know, the end of the process is the same. We do the data management, the statistical analysis, and we can provide the study report and have a publication at the end. Strengths and limitations. So as you understood, it's really the same database as before. So we have basically the same strengths and limitations, except that as it's a sample, of course, if you are studying an orphan disease, then it will not be appropriate to use this database. It's still representative, even if it's a sample, it's still representative of the French population. So you can have an access and have this study on this database and then make extrapolation. For example, for target population, you just have to make an extrapolation to get the data on the full French population. You have a great period of time. As Benjamin described, you can have access to 10 years or 20 years, but it's not like before for the SNDS where you need to put, okay, the study period and you will only get this one. Here you will get access to 10 years or 20 years, so you will directly have access to that. So limitation, not adapted to orphan disease, so you understand this. If you have at least very few patients at the beginning, of course, if you make a sample, then you will get no one. And basically, this is the really one limitation that you need. Other than that, you need to maybe know that only patients with healthcare consumptions are in this database. That means that if you have a patient really healthy that never goes to see a doctor or anything, you will not see this person in the database. But of course, because you need to have reimbursement and good quality since 2012. So now we are in 2023. So it's almost 10 years of data of good quality.
So if after all these databases it is not enough, and sometimes it is not, you have the possibility of do a linkage of the SNDS data with different types of other databases that would be not accessible via the health data hub, either via a direct or probabilistic matching, but you can link the SNDS data to registered data, clinical trials, or even the national rare disease database in France, the BND-MR, and a few things that you have to bear in mind if you would consider such project is that the direct linkage can be performed only if the other database that you link the SNDS to gathers the national social security number of the patient, and the probabilistic matching can also be performed only if there are enough variables within the registry or the database that you would use. Mainly we use linkages either to precise the information of the thing that the patient can be identified for the pathology or not, or we can also validate algorithm using the registry or the cohort study to validate the algorithm if it is large enough, or we can also properly identify the patients and link them within the SNDS to gather all the healthcare consumptions and thus use the data for medico-economic purposes or BIMs, model, impact models, for instance.
So maybe just before I explain the procedure to access this, which is very similar to what we have already seen. There is a question in the Q&R about the ESND. Of course, it's difficult to know how many patients you will get in the database because it's a sample. So here in Nava, we got an authorization to access the ESND and to have like a feasibility phase where we can just have a request and ask the number of patients with, for example, such disease or such drug or medical device, just to know how many patients there could be in the database and if it could be feasible to go with the ESND or not. So this just to explain this before carry on. So for the linkage, actually, it's the same as the standard procedure as we saw before, except that you have to put in the file that you want to do a linkage with such database. So it could be like clinical register, or it could be another cohort. This other database needs to have an authorization for the CNIL itself. And the patient have to know that their data is going to be linked to the SNDS. But other than that, it's exactly the same procedure. The linkage is done either by the CNAM, the French Health Insurance, or it can be done by yourself. It depends on the type of linkage. If it's very easy, then the CNAM will do it. And if it's a bit more complex, we will be able to help because as we have statisticians, they can use more sophisticated methods. And when the data is of poor quality, it can help a lot.
Okay, so very quickly, a few other options that are on top of this. For example, in France, there are several open data sources such as CanSanté or OpenMedic, which can be useful for quick and simple analysis, such as population estimations for a certain diagnosis or number of acts performed a certain year or reimbursement of a medical device, for example. However, these databases tend to be only available in French and also not always very easy to navigate. They can be confusing. So for that, here at HEVA, we have created a few tools that can help you visualize this sort of data in a much nicer, aggregated kind of way. So we do offer access to these tools, but this will be the subject of a future webinar. So if this could be of interest to you, don't hesitate to follow our pages on LinkedIn, Twitter, where we will announce our future webinars. Also, as we have seen previously, a major issue with the health insurance databases is that we do not have any information on the results of biology tests, everything that is clinical and pathological test biology, which can, of course, be very useful and interesting for your studies, as well as in the case of certain medical devices which are not yet reimbursed in France. If this sort of data is mandatory for you, there is a way to access it. It's through medical and pharmaceutical records, and there's also a simplified procedure, which is the MR004. And of course, if that is something of interest, we can also guide you through that.
And the last one, maybe, the HEVA is part of a bigger group called DocaPost, and we have colleagues very near from us that have set up a consortium called Agoria Santé, and they are the one that can host your data. If you have any data from your site that you don't know what to do with, or you don't know where to put them, and you need a space to host them, then we are there, and we can also link them to the SNDS very easily. So if this is something of interest, please let us know, and we can explain better. But we have very short time now, so I will not put too much detail in this, but just to know that you have this place where you can exploit your data.
Okay, so thank you for your attention. I hope that was clear. We have already taken a few of the questions, but if there are any more, please don't hesitate to put them in the Q&A, and we will answer them promptly.
If you need anything, I think you can contact us through the invite. So I don't know where there is a contact page, maybe on our website. That should be the most easier. and you can keep up with the next webinars. We will continue this series with maybe our techniques that we develop here in EVA. We have a data scientist team, we have a statistician, and they will be happy to explain also what they do. And also, as Oana mentioned, we will talk about the open data. This is data that is easily accessible for everyone. You don't need us for the open data all the time, so that could be something very useful for you also if you want to be a bit more independent on using this kind of data, and maybe if you have a very few budget also, this is important for you. We know we will do this in a next webinar.
Yeah, my name is Julien. I'm an intern in real-world evidence at Amgen, and I appreciate your presentation. Thank you. Just to clear my mind, I don't really understand why we should use ESND except for quicker access to the database. And yes, are there other reason to use the ESND database?
Yeah, there is another reason, yeah, because when you get access to ESND, you get access to all the data, not only a simple extraction. So that means if you're not quite sure on the algorithm to extract to include your patients, it could be a very good way to have access and try some algorithm.
Oh, okay, yeah, I understand. Okay, that's yes, that could be a simplest way to test something to.
Yeah, if you want to do like a feasibility phase for a study and you have a complicated disease, or a disease that is not well identified, you're not sure about the drugs or maybe the exams, like in some cancer, like prostate cancer, it's not such easy to do this. So you can do a feasibility phase on ESND, and then when you're sure about your algorithm, then you can just ask access to the SNDS. And if you want to have like a major extraction after that. But the SNDS, if you're not sure at all about the extraction that you want, it's very complicated. So
yeah, sure, yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think it seems to be fine for everyone.
No, it was clear enough. We are happy then.
Thank you to everyone for listening.
Yes, thank you very much, everyone, for joining us. I know that for some people it might have been pretty early, so thank you for the effort, and we hope to see you at a future webinar as well. And as we were saying, don't hesitate to follow us. If you search for HEVA on LinkedIn, normally we should be up in the first results, and then you will be informed of the future webinars. So thank you very much.